Welcome to the Long Funk Podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet, and today I have these books that I've been working on that I've been talking about, and they make me think about what's the next book going to be, because obviously when my mother was here I had 110,000 words, and some of them are what's in the books and some of them aren't. Now I was thinking with regards to the Sea Lion project in particular, because writing open source is really very curious. It's something that you do by yourself in hours where most people would be spending time with their family and friends, I guess. But for me, it's just about developing source code. And I've been spending a lot of time working on various bits and pieces with regards to my simulation development. And London 1940 has taken a back seat in the past few months, really. Bob Mottram, who was involved very heavily initially, his father passed away, which was a very sad thing. And he's spending time just, I guess, working through his father's effects and discovering a lot of really interesting things about his father, which sounds completely fascinating. But I reflect, for example, that I've been working on for getting the noble ape skeletons, or the simulated ape skeletons, back into the simulation. And I had originally planned on working on the planet simulation, making the planet simulation universal, which is what I'm returning to now. So my simulation work is on again, off again. But I found something very curious. I was looking for 3D graphics engines, and I realized yesterday when I made a YouTube video, and I realized actually I was providing 3D graphics engines, which is a very curious thing. It's like you're looking for something to be the next greatest thing, but actually your stuff already has that stuff in it. It's just no one's actually seeing your stuff, which is very, very curious indeed. So I look back on this thing and I'm thinking, okay, well, what time frames do I have? Well, I have the time frame of my lifetime to work on this stuff. And that's actually some of the luxury of not being... I mean, what happened historically was there would be maybe 10 developers involved, maybe 6, maybe 5, potentially 3 developers involved that I could just utilize. But that hasn't existed for, well, at least a decade now. And it really is very curious that things just continuously change. It's not that they get better. It's just that they change. And one of the things I find with my source code more than anything is it would be really great to have someone else there who's interested in maybe having a 3D graphics engine, or someone else there who's maybe just interested in something else and they're just developing the software for their own particular itches, because that also strengthens the software, and it's really the nature of the work that I've been doing for the past decade or more. So when we look at the planetary simulation, when we look at moving the noble apes into actually moving over the planetary simulation, it's not actually that much work to get there. It's just something which ideally would be done by another person, or what happens is almost through some kind of, I don't know, multifaceted element, I end up developing these bits of software and then coming back to it, and always iterative, always cumulative, always gathering, but still taking an inordinate amount of time. It would just be wonderful if someone stepped forward and said, hey, London 1940 is my jam, let me have a look at that. But it doesn't happen that way. It just requires me to continue to maintain this stuff. I was thinking this about the Windows development, because normally everything will compile with Windows, but it just requires me to sit down with a Windows machine and get it to work, which is usually about 3 to 5, well, not hours, maybe an hour to an hour and a half in some circumstances, just to get it running back on Windows. But it's the kind of thing where once in every, 5 years, someone contacts me and says, I'd really like a Windows version of the development, and I dig out my Windows machine and I do that. But it's all very isolating. I was looking at Polyworld recently. Polyworld was originally developed by Larry Yeager. There's not a version online that I could find that has been developed in the past 5 years, which is just miraculous, because I continue to develop my software, the Ape SDK, on a weekly basis. I'm constantly putting code in, constantly changing things, constantly experimenting. And that changes the nature of the code. It means that it's really easy to compile and all these kind of other variants, and the changes that I make are not that huge, and I do all through source control, so anyone that comes to it at any given time can probably get a version that will compile. And there are 3 simulations immediately extensible. You have the simulated ape, you have simulated war, and then the urban simulation, and then you have the planet simulation on top of that. So you have all these things going together. So one of the 3 books, is about me being at the top of my game with regards to this work. And it's interesting, actually, because Bob Mottram gave the best feedback to it, because he was having to remember the stuff that he'd implemented back in 2012, which was quite some time ago. And some of that stuff still runs, some of that stuff still works out, so it's not really the end of the world, because it's always constantly being developed. But I do wonder, if I'm no longer here, what does this thing do? would be really nice to have people that actively looked into this simulation and worked with it on a regular basis. And the choices I've made have really been my own choices because I don't program very frequently in Java or these kind of things, so I picked C. Objective-C, a little bit of Swift occasionally. And through doing it with C and Objective-C, I worked with Metal, Apple's graphics technology. They don't even offer metal t-shirts. I contacted my friends at Apple and said, hey, you guys have got to be making metal t-shirts because the t-shirts write themselves. But no, that didn't happen. So back to solo development once again. I don't want to satirize this. I posted out on my LinkedIn, actually, the video that I recorded. And it was like, I don't want to satirize this, but I just really find it's very curious. And actually, one of my former co-workers, Derek Stutzman, who's appeared in My Rules Are Better, responded, and he said, why don't you use Quake? Well, Quake isn't Mac compatible. You can't compile a Quake engine for Mac. You've got to pay money for a license to get Unity to work on the Mac. You've got to pay money for licenses for these things. I don't want to do that. I want an open source graphics engine that works immediately. And mysteriously, I'm the owner of 3 of the things, which is really very, very curious. It's like I'm the only one who's actually developing this stuff. And it's very, very lonely and isolating and curious. You just want people that just come to you and say, hey, we're developing this stuff too. Would you like to work together with us? I literally spent about 5 hours over the past 2 days trying to find an open source graphics engine that will compile on Mac easily, that I can easily use. And I'm like, while I'm doing this, I'm realizing, hey, I've got 3 of the things that I wrote myself. It really is very, very curious. And then I start looking at them and I'm like, well, maybe I need build scripts or maybe I need these kind of things. And it's always this narrative of maybe if I do just a little bit more, you'll actually gather the people that do this stuff. But then you just sigh deeply and like, no, you just got to keep doing what you're doing. Anyway, I might even simulcast this in a Biota or post-Biota podcast because it seems to tick both boxes, talking wistfully about simulation and the potential for a book to come out in the near future that also talks wistfully about the same simulation. Tom Barbalet in Las Vegas, Nevada, signing out.